the Great Fire of 1212 in London, overshadowed by the catastrophe of 1666. Introduction. When discussing fires in the history of London, attention inevitably gravitates toward the catastrophic blaze of 1666. Immortalized in historical accounts, literary texts, and popular memory, the Great Fire of London of 1666 overshadows another devastating inferno, nearly forgotten yet equally significant, the Great Fire of 1212. Occurring centuries earlier, the 1212 fire, though lesser known, significantly impacted medieval London, reshaping the city's urban structure and its fire safety practices. This essay delves deeply into the historical circumstances, causes, consequences, and the lasting legacy of the Great Fire of 1212, revealing how and why this tragedy has been overshadowed in popular and historical consciousness by the later catastrophe of 1666. Historical context and medieval London. In the early 13th century, London was already one of the most important cities in medieval Europe, thriving economically and politically. The city's architecture primarily consisted of tightly packed timber buildings, narrow streets, crowded markets, and bustling bridges. Infrastructure was rudimentary by modern standards. Houses were built closely together, many featuring wooden or thatched roofs. Streets were narrow, congested, and filled with flammable goods like hay, textiles, oils, and timber, perfect fuel for fire. Fire safety measures were almost non-existent, and firefighting was limited to buckets of water, basic tools, and community organization. London Bridge itself, then a central artery of commerce, was notably built from wood and was densely packed with houses, shops, and businesses. This combination of crowded wooden structures and dense urban population set the stage for a disaster of enormous scale. The events of July 10, 1212, the Great Fire of 1212, erupted on July 10th, beginning in the district known as Southwark, near London Bridge. Reports from medieval chronicles indicate that the fire was initiated accidentally, likely from a simple domestic mishap or a tradesman's oversight involving fire or embers. Quickly growing in intensity due to dry conditions, the fire spread northward, rapidly engulfing the structures on London Bridge. The bridge at the time was not merely a crossing point, but a densely inhabited, vibrant commercial hub. Many merchants lived and worked there, and the congestion meant escape routes were limited. As flames moved along the bridge, driven by strong summer winds, the situation swiftly turned tragic. Panic ensued, with desperate citizens attempting to flee either side of the bridge, trapped by both fire and crowd congestion. What distinguished the 1212 fire from other medieval blazes was the terrible human toll that occurred due to the bridge's unique conditions. Crowds fleeing from both ends of the bridge were caught in a fatal bottleneck, leading to immense casualties. Historical chronicles, such as the account by Roger of Wendover, describe vividly how people became trapped on the bridge. The horror was compounded when parts of the bridge itself collapsed, plunging many into the Thames, drowning those who were desperately seeking refuge in the water below. Estimates of casualties vary widely, but it is believed that at least 3,000 people perished in the inferno, making it one of the deadliest disasters in London's medieval history. The death toll far exceeded the fatalities attributed to the later 1666 fire, which, despite its vast destruction, recorded remarkably few fatalities, due to efficient evacuations. In the immediate aftermath of the 1212 disaster, Londoners were confronted with catastrophic loss of life, extensive structural damage, and economic devastation. The devastation was not confined to the bridge alone. Fires spread to adjoining districts, destroying homes, churches, warehouses, and commercial premises. The economic repercussions were severe, with significant disruptions to trade and daily life, compelling city authorities to reconsider urban planning and fire safety. London Bridge itself required extensive rebuilding and reinforcement, a process undertaken over decades, eventually transitioning to more robust stone structures and the gradual removal of flammable buildings from the bridge itself. Moreover, the tragedy of 1212 prompted a broader rethinking of urban planning, governance, and building regulations, albeit modestly by today's standards. Medieval city authorities imposed stricter rules on the placement and construction of buildings, especially regarding the use of flammable materials. Although limited, these regulations marked an early attempt at organized fire prevention policies. Despite its catastrophic magnitude, the Great Fire of 1212 largely receded from collective memory due to the passage of time and subsequent historical events. However, its influence subtly yet persistently reshaped London's urban development. Reconstruction efforts led to more robust urban design principles, incorporating wider streets, clear passages for emergencies, and reduced overcrowding on key thoroughfares. Notably, these early reforms anticipated principles later dramatically reinforced following the Great Fire of 1666. The 1212 tragedy underscored the vulnerabilities of medieval cities, driving incremental changes that, while not revolutionary, laid crucial foundations for later urban planning. The disaster became a cautionary tale referenced in subsequent city council debates about urban safety, firefighting preparedness, and disaster management. The severity of the 1212 disaster also sparked innovations in firefighting techniques and equipment. Although primitive by contemporary standards, bucket brigades and fire watch patrols became standardized as communities recognized the need for coordinated emergency responses. Despite its significance, the 1212 fire remains overshadowed by the Great Fire of London in 1666, largely due to several key historical and cultural factors. First, the 1666 fire occurred during a period rich in documentation, diaristic accounts, and historical narratives by famous chroniclers such as Samuel Pepys and John Evelyn. These accounts preserved vivid and dramatic first-hand experiences, embedding the disaster deeply within public consciousness. Additionally, the 1666 fire devastated a much larger geographic area of London, destroying prominent landmarks such as St. Paul's Cathedral and altering the cityscape profoundly and permanently. The visual impact of the 1666 fire, combined with its documentation and cultural significance in literature and art, naturally captured greater public attention and historical prominence. By comparison, the 1212 fire, despite its considerable loss of life, occurred during an era less comprehensively documented, lacking the same vivid chronicles and widespread dissemination of written accounts. Thus, the disaster's human suffering faded more easily from collective memory, overshadowed by subsequent calamities and events. The Great Fire of 1212, though overshadowed, deserves recognition and remembrance for its devastating human cost and profound influence on medieval London's urban planning and fire safety. Understanding this tragedy not only illuminates the historical vulnerabilities of urban environments, but also enriches the broader narrative of London's evolution as a city shaped repeatedly by disaster and recovery. While the fire of 1666 remains prominent, revisiting and acknowledging the disaster of 1212 reminds us that each historical catastrophe, regardless of popular visibility, contributed significantly to the development and safety practices of the cities we inhabit today. The lost lives, the urban planning lessons learned, and the subtle but significant shifts in medieval policy and consciousness following the 1212 disaster collectively warrant a rediscovery and reevaluation of this overshadowed tragedy in London's long and tumultuous history.